Welcome to Friday Farside, everyone. I'm Sheldon, and this week we're going to talk about the future of neoliberal democracies. So this one came from just a stray comment a friend of mine made, just making fun of the form of government, just kind of making a negative comparison to it as a joke. And I don't even remember what the comparison was, but it got me thinking about whether if it can be such an obvious butt of a joke, is it really inevitably in decline? Of course, we've seen these headlines, decline of democratic values in countries and whatnot. But of course, in the back of my mind, I've always had the belief that the good guys will win in the end. And of course, that's what you want to believe. And the good guys, of course, are always yourself and the culture you grew up in and, your values. So I guess the value of having a site that does semi-rigorous AI analysis on the future is that we can take a look at the actual demographic trends and technological trends and ask, are there inevitable forces at work that are going to create a Darwinian situation where certain forms of government win out over others? And I've always had the idle thought that maybe China, which you'll hear the prediction call authoritarian capitalism, might have a more efficient model, and that model will spread through the world and ultimately win out. So that was always kind of an idle thought until this trend prediction, which maybe adds a little more rigor to that possibility. So that's probably enough stealing thunder from Biff and Betty. So I'll hand it off to them now with the caveat that remember that this is all AI generated, so don't take it completely seriously or trust every fact. But do listen closely to what Biff and Betty have to say today. It's all yours, guys.
All right, let's see here. Democracy. Fired. Not overthrown, not conquered, just fired.
Technically. Or maybe its desk just gets moved around, like that guy in Office Space. He ends up in the basement storeroom. He's technically fired, but still hanging around, looking busy, and the paychecks keep arriving due to a payroll glitch. Welcome to Friday Farsight. This week, Strategic Farsight is extrapolating a trend, not a single prediction. And the trend is pretty heavy. From about 42 neoliberal democracies in 2025 down to near zero by 2200.
Near zero, as in functionally extinct.
Functionally extinct. The Freedom House-style competitive elections plus free markets model, it becomes, a rarity. The article's word is remnants.
Okay, hold on. Quick clarification for the folks at home. Neoliberal democracy, that's a specific flavor, right? It's not just any country with elections.
Right, good to pin that down. Neoliberal democracy is the fusion that really took off in the late 20th century. You keep the democratic part, so competitive elections, civil liberties, constitutional limits on power, and you bolt it to a neoliberal economic program. Free markets, globalization, privatization, government staying out of the market as much as possible. United States, UK, Germany, Canada, Australia, most of the EU. 42 countries, roughly 22% of the nations on Earth, but only about 15% of the world's population.
So it's the Reagan, Thatcher, and after model. The one that, basically won the Cold War and then spread like
the franchise a lot of people thought was the final chapter.
Fukuyama, The End of History, 1992. The idea that with the Soviets gone, liberal democratic capitalism had no serious rival left.
Someone did the reading.
Hey, I play the knucklehead, but I was actually in a play about this in college, The End of History and the Last Man. We adapted the essay. It was a disaster. The lead forgot his lines and called the director Hegel by accident. Not my finest hour in theater.
Anyway, that thesis has aged like box wine at Target. The system we thought was the last station on the train, the article is saying, might just be a rest stop.
Remnants. That's a rug store word. I keep picturing a banner, "Come on down to Remnants Are Us. Slightly used democracy. 50% off. Sorry, we lost the user manual."
And it's closer to the vibe than you'd think. By 2150, the remaining neoliberal democracies are isolated pockets. Certain Swiss cantons, maybe New Zealand. Small places, weird places, protected places.
Wait, back up. When I hear the end of democracy, I picture tanks in the square, a general on TV, guy with a big mustache.
Not this time.
I know, the Illuminati. We keep thinking we're living in a democracy, but secretly, from the shadows.
That's the whole twist. This isn't a coup story. It's a customer churn story. Democracy doesn't get overthrown, it gets outcompeted.
Outcompeted by what?
3 alternative governance models the article calls out. 1, authoritarian capitalism. Think China, Singapore, Vietnam, maybe Hungary and Poland. You keep the market but drop the competitive elections. 2, technocratic governance. AI-assisted, data-driven, optimizing for measurable outcomes. 3, post-democratic federations, like the EU evolving further into a technocracy, or potentially new city-state networks.
Huh. So the competition isn't some evil empire. It's more like a better operating system ships and suddenly your old one looks creaky and slow.
Exactly. And here's the part that hit me. The article doesn't say the authoritarians invade. It says the democracies stop delivering, and their own citizens, especially the generations born after 1990, start preferring something else.
Oh, that's uglier than a coup. That's a creeping sickness, slowly invading our brains, making us all slaves. Then one day the neighbors are looking at your lawn and going, maybe we need an HOA.
Pretty much. And quick orientation for new listeners, Strategic Farsight has a whole database of predictions, trends, and scenarios. A trend, like this one, takes a single measurable value and extrapolates it 500 years, drawing on a stack of related predictions underneath.
500 years. Put it this way, 500 years ago, Martin Luther had just nailed his theses to the door. Now, imagine sitting in Wittenberg in 1517 predicting the Enlightenment and the French Revolution with a straight face. That's the ambition we're grading.
That's the ambition. And the article is honest about the fog getting thicker the further out you go.
Okay, walk me through it. Mechanism, please.
3 phases. Phase 1, 2025 to 2075, is the accelerating decline. 4 main drivers: economic inequality, climate pressure, tech disruption, generational drift.
Inequality. We've heard this song.
The article frames it sharply, though. Neoliberal policies over the last 40 years contributed to wealth gaps at Gilded Age levels. Democratic systems couldn't close those gaps, and middle-class voters started preferring alternatives that promise economic security over market efficiency. Plus, the social breakdown. The article specifically invokes the deaths of despair research.
Right. Case and Deaton, 2 Princeton economists, and Case and husband Angus Deaton, who ran the numbers on midlife mortality in the U.S. and found it was going up, not down, for the first time in generations, driven by suicide, drug overdose, and alcohol-related disease, especially among working-class Americans without college degrees. That's not a policy problem.
That's the body's heart monitor flatlining while the doctor is still fighting over the treatment plan.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, driver 2, climate.
Why?
Because climate adaptation may require coordinated responses at a speed and scale that democratic cycles just can't produce. The atmosphere runs on a multi-decade schedule. Electoral cycles run on 2, 4, 6 years. So the article suggests countries face a real choice: stay democratic and adapt slowly, or concentrate power and move fast.
And China already has its hand on the move fast lever.
China is the case study. Authoritarian capitalism with the ability to build infrastructure and push industrial policy at a pace electoral democracies can't match. High-speed rail? China went from 0 to over 40,000 kilometers in roughly 15 years. California has been trying to build a single line for longer than that.
Ouch. And that's just peacetime infrastructure. What happens when the emergency is real?
That's the bet. If climate adaptation means overriding property rights objections, NIMBY lawsuits, industry lobbying, democratic systems face a major friction penalty. Autocracies, the article argues, just won't have that penalty.
Still, a couple of degrees of warming, I just don't see it being truly existential. Some crops migrate north, some millionaires with coastal houses migrate 10 meters up the hill. Democracies will muddle through just fine, like they always do.
It's just another Darwinian trait, Biff, like a gazelle with short legs. Democracies will simply be a little less agile adapting to a changing environment.
Which, because it's changing, now favors the inherently totalitarian gazelles.
Yes. Driver 3, technology. Social media already polarizes. AI systems may soon be capable of sophisticated manipulation of public opinion. Surveillance tech is better suited to authoritarian governance because democracies have pesky civil liberties to respect.
So the very tech that was supposed to liberate democracy turns out to be the authoritarian's favorite power tool. You remember all those 2011 op-eds about how Twitter was going to free the Middle East?
Facebook was supposed to be the Arab Spring's operating system.
And the same platforms are now very, very useful for the other side. Probably more useful because authoritarian governments can command platforms and democracies can only, politely suggest.
The gun democracy handed itself.
And paid $6 trillion in market cap to build, by the way. We have got to be the dumbest prey in the savannah.
Driver 4, generational. Post-1990 generations pull lower on attachment to democratic norms and lower on attachment to free market ideology, both legs of the stool wobbling at once. There's a researcher at Johns Hopkins, Yasha Monk, who's tracked this in World Values Survey data for years. The share of millennials who consider it essential to live in a democracy is way lower than for their grandparents.
Okay, I have to push back because every generation sounds ungrateful at 25 and becomes their parents at 45.
It's not mild skepticism, Biff.
Hey, did I touch a nerve?
Sorry, but the surveys show active willingness to trade democratic participation for economic security. That's structural, not a teenage phase. They've been shaped by a very specific experience: 2 massive financial crises, a global pandemic, visible climate disasters, social media-driven polarization, and an economy that keeps delivering stagnant wages and unaffordable housing. If you grew up watching that, the sales pitch for neoliberal democracy sounds hollow.
Okay, that's fair. The pitch hasn't been great. It's like trying to sell a 20-year-old car to a 20-year-old. They were in diapers when it was new and running fine, but all they see is what's in front of them today.
And they probably see it with clearer eyes.
All right, so phase 1 is 2025 to 2075. That's the lifetime of most of our listeners.
That's the point. We're not talking about ancient history or the far future. We're talking about the next 50 years while your kids grow up.
Yikes. What's phase 2?
2075 to 2150, system transformation. The alternatives actually take over. Authoritarian capitalism spreads beyond China. Technocratic AI governance emerges. Post-democratic federations form. The article calls this period more speculative but plausible.
And phase 3?
2150 to 2500, stabilization and remnants. The few surviving neoliberal democracies persist because of geographic isolation, cultural tradition, niche economic advantages, or just small populations that enable direct participation.
New Zealand, Swiss cantons, that's it?
That's the short list. And the article implies those survive as something close to cultural preserves. Swiss cantons are an interesting choice because a few of them still practice something called Landsgemeinde, cantonal assemblies where citizens gather in an open-air square and vote by raising their hands.
Hands in the air, like town meetings in New England?
Same energy. It's been running in a few cantons since the Middle Ages. Appenzell Innerrhoden is the famous holdout. Real, live, face-to-face, direct democracy.
So in 2150, democracy survives in the same small places it was invented, which is weirdly tidy.
Tidy and sad. It's like the language of a culture retreating to the villages it started in.
Like Cornish or Welsh or Irish Gaelic, a tongue that once dominated an island and then it shrinks back to a few coastal towns.
Exactly. Linguists have a concept for that, actually. Relict area. A place rocky enough, isolated enough, culturally stubborn enough that the older practice survives the wider change. Democracy becomes a relict practice. Not extinct, just very, very local.
Wait, let's stay here for a second. The idea that by 2150, democracy is a niche practice, like tourists book a trip to a Swiss canton the way they visit colonial Williamsburg, to see how humans used to govern themselves.
Democratic heritage tourism.
That's devastating. Imagine a kid 100 years from now asking their parent,
What was an election? And the parent having to explain it the way we'd explain a rotary phone.
Or a letter, paper, stamped, sealed, dropped in a slot.
Okay. Contrarian hat on. I want to push on this because extrapolating 500 years is a wild ride. The 20th century is littered with forecasts that looked airtight and turned out to be laughable.
The article agrees to a point. It calls the 2025 to 2075 extrapolation moderate confidence, and it cites Freedom House, Polity4, and the Varieties of Democracy Project, VDEM, all three of which are tracking measurable decline in democratic quality across most established democracies over the past 15, 20 years.
VDEM, that's out of the University of Gothenburg.
Yep. Swedish-led research consortium, huge data set, hundreds of variables per country, going back centuries in some cases. Their Liberal Democracy Index has been trending downward globally for over a decade. First time that's happened since the 1970s.
So the near-term decline isn't coffee shop speculation, it's data. Okay.
Right. The 2075 to 2150 period, the article admits, is significant speculation. Beyond 2150, highly speculative.
Good. I like a forecast that admits its own fog of war. Counter scenarios.
3. Renewal, catastrophic collapse, and cyclical revival.
Renewal sounds like the good one. Start there.
Renewal is where technology actually saves democracy instead of killing it. The article mentions blockchain-based voting, AI-assisted deliberation, new forms of economic democracy. And there are real-world pilots running now. Taiwan's V-Taiwan, Ireland's Citizens' Assemblies.
Wait. V-Taiwan? What's that?
Oh, this is where I get excited. V-Taiwan is a digital platform the Taiwanese government has been using since about 2015 for policy deliberation. There's software under it called Polis, which uses machine learning to find consensus in large public discussions. Instead of the thread of Twitter flame war model, Polis optimizes for what unites, and it surfaces the proposals that the most people across the political spectrum can live with.
So it's the opposite of the outrage algorithm.
Exactly opposite. Twitter optimizes for what divides. Polis optimizes for what unites. Taiwan used it to draft real policy on Uber, Airbnb, online alcohol sales, and in most cases avoided the street fight outcome you'd get from traditional political debate.
Oh, that's actually beautiful. So it's a live proof of concept.
Live proof. And Ireland did something equally striking with citizens' assemblies. They randomly selected around 100 citizens, gave them expert testimony, had them deliberate for months on really contentious issues: abortion, climate change, aging. The recommendations went to national referendum and actually passed.
Randomly selected citizens. That's basically sortition, right? The ancient Athenian method. Lottery instead of election.
Exactly. Combine sortition with modern deliberative technology, and you get a democratic renewal story that isn't science fiction. It's running now, in small doses.
Okay, so democratic renewal is, hey, we built the institutions for the age of newspapers and town halls, let's rebuild them for the age of the network. I can live with that.
Catastrophic collapse is the scary counter. In some scenarios, climate disruption or another crisis is so bad that governance just fragments. Not orderly transition to authoritarian capitalism, just local arrangements, warlordism, chaos.
That's the Mad Max option.
Basically. And cyclical revival is the Tocqueville idea.
De Tocqueville, Democracy in America, 1830s. French aristocrat visits the United States and writes this enormous book about why democracy seems to be self-reinforcing in America.
That's him. And the cyclical revival thesis is that democratic instincts, habits of association, local self-government, mutual responsibility, are kind of latent in humans and bubble back up after periods of suppression. So maybe we see an authoritarian interlude, and several generations later, a new democratic synthesis emerges.
Huh. So the counter scenarios range from Democracy 2.0 saves us to Mad Max to it just comes back on its own eventually.
Essentially. And the article's honest that any of them could happen.
Okay, back to the baseline prediction, because I want to chew on the implications. If this is what actually happens, what does it feel like, day to day, for a human being?
Short term, surprisingly not that different. Gradual policy shifts. Countries stop having meaningful competitive elections. Parties converge, or one party just wins predictably. Courts get more deferential. Media gets more aligned. But the grocery store still has groceries. People still go to work.
Creeping vine, not a wrecking ball.
But here's where it gets interesting. The language we use for ourselves starts to shift.
The language?
Think about the word citizen. It implies a peer relationship with the state. You have rights, you have a vote, you're a co-author. Now compare user, subject, stakeholder, resident. Each one of those implies something else. Consumption, subordination, mere presence.
Oh, that's a gut punch. The vocabulary change. That happens so gradually no one notices until suddenly citizen sounds archaic.
Like comrade or freeman, yeoman.
Freeman, yeoman. Wow. You know, the historian Tony Judt, before he died, had this phrase, the social ties of trust. He meant the way democratic citizenship builds an invisible scaffolding where strangers basically treat each other as fellow owners of a shared project. Replace citizen with user, and you don't replace the scaffolding, you just remove it. And you're walking on air.
That's a good reference, Biff. And I think that's exactly what the article is suggesting happens quietly. The scaffolding erodes without anyone announcing that it has.
Okay, let me try a scenario. Imagine 2100. I'm 150 years old, thanks to longevity tech we covered several episodes ago. And I wake up in my pod. Do I still vote?
In most places, no. You interact with a civic AI that models your preferences, or you weigh in on local decisions through some participatory dashboard. But the big questions get decided at a higher level, algorithmically, for efficiency.
Wait, participatory dashboard?
Sure, you get to rate things, you get to express preferences, but you don't select who runs the country. The country runs on an optimization function.
An optimization function. For what?
That's the question. In the technocratic scenario, it's measurable outcomes: GDP, public health, emissions, crime rates, housing adequacy, stuff you can put on a dashboard.
But human flourishing is mostly missing from the dashboard. Dignity, meaning, artistic freedom, the right to be wrong in public, the right to be weird.
And that's the deep worry. What gets optimized gets served. What can't be measured tends to get trimmed.
The unmeasurable gets cut. That's a whole philosophy in a sentence. It's Goodhart's law dressed up as government.
Pretty much. When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. If you tell the system to maximize GDP, it gets very good at GDP and subtly worse at everything GDP doesn't capture.
Caring for an aging parent, writing a symphony nobody asks for, protesting a law you find unjust. None of it shows up in GDP.
Right. And a healthy democracy is, in its messy way, a forum where the things that can't be measured at least get argued about. You lose the forum, you lose the argument.
Okay, now I want to put the hardest question on the table, because I think this is where the article is quietly daring us to look.
Go ahead.
If authoritarian capitalism or AI technocracy delivers better material outcomes for 50 straight years, higher incomes, better healthcare, faster climate adaptation, lower crime, do you still defend democracy?
That's the question, Biff. That's the whole question. Most people say yes in theory, and most people vote no in practice when things start going well under the alternative.
Is democracy a means or an end?
Honestly, both. And this is where I part ways with the coolly neutral tone of the article. It's an end because the dignity of self-government is a real value, not reducible to outcomes. Kant had this idea that people are ends in themselves, not means. A political order that treats citizens only as inputs to an optimization function crosses a moral line, even if the numbers come out great.
Kant, in the podcast. We're getting serious.
We're getting serious. And democracy is also a means, because when you lose the feedback loop of citizens correcting power, you lose the error correction mechanism of the whole system. Even if the dashboard looks great for 50 years, there's no guarantee the 61st year isn't a disaster, because the ability to course correct has been amputated.
So democracy is a society's redundancy. It's the backup system.
It's the immune system, not always efficient, sometimes overreactive, but it's how the body politic notices and corrects its own mistakes. Chesterton had this line, "Tradition is the democracy of the dead, giving votes to the ancestors." I'd extend it to, democracy is also the insurance policy for the not yet born. Your grandchildren get to course correct on what you did wrong, but only if the system for course correction is still intact when they arrive.
Insurance for the not yet born. That's a knockout line.
Thanks.
And the prediction is that we'll let the policy lapse. We'll trade our immune system for a smoother running body. And we won't notice what we gave up until we get sick and the body's defenseless.
That's the dark version. And notice the article doesn't declare this is doomed or not doomed. It says the key question is not whether neoliberal democracy survives, but what replaces it, and whether the replacement preserves human agency and social cooperation.
Okay. I want to end on something, because for me, this episode is personal. I grew up thinking of voting as this sort of slightly boring civic ritual, standing in line at the elementary school gym in November, the creaky folding curtain, the little sticker afterward. And this article just made me realize that that ritual is possibly being retired in my kids' lifetimes.
And even if it isn't retired, Biff, even if democratic renewal wins out and we build Democracy 2.0, it's not going to build itself. V-Taiwan didn't happen because a chip fell out of the sky. It happened because a crew of engineers and activists and a government that actually listened decided to build it.
Decided to build it. Yeah.
And that's the thing. I won a lot of debate rounds in college by being better prepared than my opponent. But prep only matters if somebody shows up on the other side of the table. That's what democracy is, the willingness to keep showing up.
Okay. So, listeners, if there's a takeaway, I guess it's this. You're not on the sidelines of this trend. You're inside of it.
And the remnants, the Swiss cantons, the New Zealands, they don't survive by accident. They survive because people inside them actively decide to keep it alive. Every generation.
Deciding to keep it alive. That's the whole game.
Friday Farsight listeners, thank you for coming along with us this week. If you want to read the full trend article and explore Strategic Farsight's growing database of predictions, trends, and scenarios, head over to the website. Next Friday, we'll be back with another look into the long view.
Until then, go vote. Maybe by, pressing like on this podcast. Is that democracy?
That's Biff. I'm Betty. Thanks for listening to Friday Farsight.